There are objects in our lives that hold more than their weight in memories. For Albert Freeman, that object was tucked away in a dusty cardboard box in his garage, waiting patiently to tell its story once more. Well, Albie, there you are, old friend. Albert's fingers carefully lifted a battered fishing lure, scratched, dented, but still gleaming with traces of its original silver and blue. The lure had seen better days. Its paint was chipped, revealing the metal beneath, like battle. Scars earned over decades of patient service. But to Albert, each scratch told a story. Each dent held a lesson, learned on quiet waters under endless skies. His wife, Margaret, approached from the house, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. "What are you rummaging through now, Albert?" "We're supposed to be cleaning out that garage, not taking trips down memory lane." Albert held up the lure with reverence. "Remember this little fellow? Dad gave it to me when I was 8 years old." Margaret's expression softened as she recognized the treasured piece. "Oh my, that old thing is still with us? I haven't seen it in years." As Albert turned the lure in the morning light, the years seemed to fall away like autumn leaves. He was no longer a grandfather of 6, no longer a man whose knees creaked when he stood. He was 8 years old again, standing on the shore of Miller's Pond, watching his father thread this very lure onto a line, with the patience of someone who understood that the best things in life couldn't be rushed. "Dad always said this lure had magic in it," Albert whispered to Margaret. "Not the kind that catches fish, but the kind that catches moments." The memory washed over Albert like morning mist on water. It was 1956. An 8-year-old Albert Freeman was about to learn his first lesson about patience. "Now, Albert, fishing isn't about the catching," his father William had said in his gentle but firm voice. "It's about the waiting, the watching, the listening." Young Albert had been eager and impatient. "But Dad, when will we catch something big?" William Freeman was a man of few words but deep wisdom. A factory worker who found his church in the cathedral of nature, his sanctuary in the rhythm of casting and reeling. He knelt beside his son, showing him how to cast. The lure arced through the air, landing with a gentle splash. "You hear that sound, son? That's the sound of possibility. Every cast is a new chance, a new story waiting to unfold." When young Albert complained that his arms were getting tired, his father painted a different picture. "Albert, look around you. What do you see? Trees, water, some birds? I see a classroom bigger than any school, teaching lessons you can't learn from books. See that heron over there? He's been standing still for 20 minutes, waiting for just the right moment. Patience, son. That's the first lesson of fishing and of life." As they sat in comfortable silence, Albert began to understand. The gentle lap of water against the shore became a lullaby. The whisper of wind through cattails became a conversation. The warmth of his father's presence became a memory he would carry for 70 years. William pointed to the lure bobbing in the water. "That little lure there, it's not just metal and paint, Albert. It's hope. Every time you cast it, you're casting hope into the water." "Hope for catching fish?" young Albert asked. "Hope for catching life, son. Hope for catching moments like this one." When Albert's line finally went taut with his first fish small. Barely worth keeping, the joy wasn't in the catching. It was in sharing the moment with someone who mattered. His father's pride shone brighter than any trophy. "Well done, son. You'll remember this day for the rest of your life." And William Freeman was right. 70 years later, Albert could still feel the weight of that small fish in his hands, still see the pride shining in his father's weathered face. Not every fishing trip ended with a catch. Albert learned this lesson on a humid July morning when he was 12, a lesson that would serve him well in the decades to come. "Today's the day, Dad. I can feel it. The big one's waiting for me." His father smiled at his enthusiasm. "Could be, Albert. But remember what I always tell you. The fish you don't catch teach you more than the ones you do," Albert recited dutifully. For an hour, they waited as clouds gathered overhead. Then it happened, a strike so powerful it nearly pulled the rod from his 12-year-old hands. For 10 minutes, boy and fish engaged in an epic battle. The fish was magnificent easily, the biggest anyone had ever seen in Miller's Pond. Then, just as Albert began to gain ground, the line suddenly went slack. The lure emerged from the water, bent and empty. Albert threw his rod down in frustration, tears streaming down his face. His father sat down beside him on a fallen log. "Albert, come here. I had him, Dad. I really had him. That was my fish." "Was it? Or were you his boy for a few minutes?" William asked gently. "Son, that fish just gave you something more valuable than any trophy on a wall. He gave you a story. 50 years from now, you'll tell your own children about the day you fought. The greatest fish in Miller's Pond." Sometimes, Albert, the things we lose teach us more than the things we keep. That fish taught you that you're stronger than you thought, braver than you knew. He taught you that not every battle is meant to be won. Some are meant to be fought with honor. As thunder rumbled overhead and rain began to fall, Albert picked up his rod and carefully reeled in his bent but unbroken lure. Years later, he would understand that his father had given him a gift, that day the ability to find meaning in loss, strength in disappointment, and hope in letting go. By the time Albert reached his 20s, the old lure had become his faithful companion through life's changing seasons. It was during these years that he met someone who would share in its magic, a friendship forged by the quiet. Understanding that comes from standing side by side at the water's edge. "Mind if I fish this stretch too? I promise I won't crowd your luck." Albert looked up from his tackle box. "Plenty of river for both of us. I'm Albert Freeman." "David Martinez. That's a beautiful old lure you've got there. Looks like it has some stories to tell." Albert held up the well-worn lure, its battle scars more pronounced, but its spirit undiminished. "This little fellow, been with me since I was 8. My father gave it to me. My grandfather had one just like it. Said it was worth more than all his other tackle combined. What began as a chance encounter by the river blossomed into a friendship that would span 4 decades. David, a teacher at the local school, shared Albert's appreciation for the quiet wisdom found in nature's classroom. They discovered that the best part of fishing wasn't the fish at all, it was the conversations that flowed as naturally as the river itself. You know, Albert, I've been thinking about what makes a good teacher, David said one morning as they cast their lines. I think it's the same thing that makes a good fisherman. How's that? Patience. The willingness to wait for the right moment. And knowing that sometimes the lesson is more important than the catch. Albert nodded thoughtfully. My dad used to say something similar. He'd tell me that fishing was just life in miniature, full of hope, disappointment, surprise, and joy. Sometimes all in the same afternoon. Their friendship deepened through shared silences and gentle conversations. They celebrated each other's successes and supported each other through life's inevitable sorrows. When Albert's father passed away suddenly, it was David who sat with him by the river, understanding that sometimes friendship means simply being present. He's still with you, you know, David said quietly, in that lure, in these waters, in everything he taught you. Albert's voice was thick with emotion. I keep thinking I should have learned more from him, asked more questions. The fact that you're here, carrying on what he loved, that's all the questions and answers he ever needed. Through 30 years of friendship, Albert and David discovered that the greatest catch of all was the bond they'd formed. Two souls connected by their shared reverence for life's simple, profound moments. Life, like weather, rarely follows our plans. Albert learned this lesson on a grey October morning when he was 45, a lesson that would reshape his understanding of resilience and adaptability. Albert and David arrived at their favorite fishing spot to find the landscape dramatically changed. The spring floods had been the worst in decades, reshaping the riverbank and scattering their familiar landmarks like puzzle pieces. Well, would you look at that, Albert said, surveying the damage. 20 years we've been coming here, and the river decided to redecorate. David pointed to where their usual spot used to be. That old oak we always sat under, it's completely gone. For a moment, both men stood in disappointment, their weekend plans seemingly ruined. Then the sky opened up, releasing a steady rain. Wait a minute, Albert, David said, studying the changed landscape thoughtfully. Remember what your father used to say about fishing? Sometimes the best catches come from the most unexpected places. David pointed upstream to where a new eddy had formed around a massive fallen tree. Look there. That flood created something new. See how the water swirls around that trunk? That's exactly where fish like to rest. Instead of retreating, they decided to adapt. As they cast from their improvised fishing spots, something magical happened. The changed conditions that had initially frustrated them began to reveal their hidden gifts. Over the next few hours, they caught more fish than they had in months at their familiar spot. The storm that had seemed like an obstacle had actually stirred up the water, making the fish more active. You know what this reminds me of, Albert? David said, as they packed up their gear in the rain. What's that? Life. Just when you think you have everything figured out, something comes along and changes all the rules. You can either spend your time missing what was, or you can learn to fish the new waters. Albert examined his old lure, now glistening with raindrops. Despite the weather and changed conditions, It had performed beautifully. This old lure has been through a lot of changes, hasn't it? Different waters, different weather, different challenges. But it still does what it was made to do. Maybe that's the real lesson, David replied. It's not about staying the same. It's about staying true to your purpose, no matter how the world changes around you. Albert was 58 when he experienced what he would later call his most important fishing trip, a morning when he learned that the greatest catches can't be measured in pounds and inches. It had been a difficult year. The lumber mill was closing, and at 58, starting over felt overwhelming. His daughter Sarah was going through a messy divorce, and his son Thomas was struggling with problems Albert couldn't fix with fatherly advice alone. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing any of this right, Dad," Albert said softly to himself as he cast his line into the familiar waters. For the first hour, Albert focused intently on fishing, but the fish simply weren't biting. Instead of frustration, however, he found himself settling into an unexpected peace. A great blue heron landed nearby, hunting in the shallows with patient precision. "Look at you, beautiful," Albert whispered. "You've got the right idea. Sometimes you just have to be still and let life come to you." As the morning unfolded, Albert began to notice things he'd been too focused on catching fish to see before. The way the mist rose from the water, like spirits returning to heaven. The intricate dance of insects on the surface. The gentle symphony of bird songs greeting the new day. "You know what, little lure?" Albert said, reeling in his line slowly. "I think you've given me something better than fish today." He found himself thinking about his father, gone now for 15 years. He could almost hear William's voice on the morning breeze, reminding him that the best things in life couldn't be rushed or forced. For the first time in months, Albert felt truly present. The weight of his worries hadn't disappeared, but they seemed manageable. Now, put into perspective by the eternal rhythm of flowing water and the simple gift of being alive to witness another sunrise. When a small fish finally took the bait, Albert gently reeled it in and released it with a smile. "Thank you, little one, but I think I already caught what I came for today." As Albert packed up his gear, he realized that this morning had given him something more valuable than any trophy fish. It had given him perspective, peace, and the reminder that sometimes the biggest catch is simply the ability to appreciate the moment you're living in. Albert was 67 when he realized that the greatest purpose of his old lure wasn't to catch fish, it was to catch the hearts and imagination of the next generation. "Grandpa Albert, this one looks really old. Does it still work?" 8-year-old Emma held up the weathered lure with curiosity. Albert smiled warmly. "Oh, Emma, that little lure has more magic in it than any new one you could buy. It belonged to my father and his father before him." Emma examined the lure carefully, tracing its worn edges with her small finger. "It's kind of beat up, isn't it?" "The best things in life usually are, sweetheart. Those scratches and dents, each one is a story, a memory, a lesson learned." Albert's son Thomas approached with his 10-year-old son Jake, both carrying new fishing gear. "Dad, you sure you're up for teaching 2 kids how to fish?" "Son, I've been waiting for this day for years. Besides, Patience is the first thing they need to learn. 3 generations of Freemen stood at Miller's Pond, now part of a small nature preserve the same waters where Albert had first learned to fish decades ago. Now, before we cast a single line, I want you to look around. What do you see? Albert asked, kneeling between Emma and Jake. Jake answered impatiently, "Water, Grandpa. Can we start fishing now?" Emma was more thoughtful. "I see birds and trees, and it's really quiet here." "That's right, Emma. This place is like a church. But instead of walls and windows, it has trees and sky. And instead of sermons, it has lessons that come from just paying attention." Albert demonstrated casting with his old lure. Despite its age, it still flew true and straight. "This lure was made before your daddy was born, Jake. Before computers, before cell phones, before a lot of things you think you need. But it still does its job perfectly." As the morning progressed, Albert watched his grandchildren experience the same wonder he had felt 60 years earlier. Emma's first successful cast brought squeals of delight. Jake's initial impatience gradually gave way to the meditative rhythm of casting and waiting. "Grandpa, why is fishing so peaceful?" Emma asked after a long, quiet period. "Because when you're fishing, Emma, you have to slow down to the speed of the water, the speed of the fish, the speed of life itself. In our busy world, that's a rare and precious thing." When Jake caught his first fish, Albert helped him reel it in, then asked the important question, "What did you learn while you were catching it?" Jake thought hard. That I had to wait and be quiet?" "Exactly. You learned patience. You learned that the best things come to those who wait. Those are lessons that will help you your whole life, not just when you're fishing." Albert carefully showed Emma how to attach the lure to her line. "Someday, Emma, this lure might belong to you. And when it does, I want you to remember that it's not just a piece of metal. It's a promise to pass on what you learn, to take care of the people you love, and to always make time for moments like this." Emma nodded solemnly. "I promise, Grandpa." As the sun climbed higher, the Freeman family packed up their gear, but they were taking home more than just memories. They were carrying forward a tradition that connected them to their past and would guide them into their future. And so we returned to Albert in his garage, 75 years old, holding the same lure that had started this journey 7 decades earlier. As Margaret watched from the doorway and memories swirled around him like morning mist on water, Albert understood the true weight of what he held in his weathered hands. "You know what I realized today, Margaret? This little lure has been my teacher all along." Margaret settled into the chair beside him. "How so, Albert?" "It taught me patience when I was young and eager. It taught me resilience when life knocked me down. It taught me that some of the most important moments happen when you're not trying to force anything, just being present, being open to whatever comes." Albert traced each familiar mark with his finger, the deep scratch from the day he'd fought the big one that got away, the dented edge from when Jake had accidentally dropped it on the rocks, the worn paint that spoke of thousands of casts across decades of dawns. "My father gave me this lure when I was 8, thinking he was giving me something to catch fish with. But what he really gave me was a way to connect to him, to nature, to myself, to the people I love. Margaret smiled. Remember when you taught the children how to fish with it? Emma held it like it was made of gold. In a way, it is made of gold, Albert chuckled. Not the kind you can spend, but the kind you can only share. As Albert held the lure, he could see the invisible threads that connected. All these moments, threads of love, learning, loss, and hope woven together into the tapestry of a life well lived. You know what the strangest part is, Margaret? I don't think I ever really understood what fishing was about until today. And what's that? It's about faith. Every time you cast that line, you're saying, I believe something good is possible, even when you don't catch anything, even when storms come, even when the waters change, you keep casting, keep believing. Albert stood slowly, walking to his tackle box. He carefully placed the lure in its special compartment, then picked up a pen and paper. Emma's birthday is next month. I think it's time this old lure started its next adventure. Margaret looked surprised. You're going to give it to her? Not give, pass on. There's a difference. I'm going to pass on the responsibility of caring for it, along with all the lessons it holds. As Albert wrote his letter to Emma, the afternoon sun began to set, casting golden light across the garage where this story began. But unlike most endings, this one felt more like a beginning, the beginning of another chapter in the ongoing story of love passed down through generations. Albert sealed the letter in an envelope and tied it to the old tackle box with a ribbon. You've been a faithful friend, little one, he said to the lure. Now go teach another generation what you taught me, that the best catches in life aren't the ones you can hold in your hands, but the ones you carry in your heart. That evening, as Albert and Margaret sat on their porch watching the stars emerge, Albert felt the deep satisfaction that comes from understanding your place in the great continuum of life. Any regrets, Albert? Margaret asked. After a long, thoughtful pause, Albert answered, just one. I wish I could tell my father how perfectly his gift worked. That old lure caught everything he hoped it would: moments, memories, lessons, love. And so the old fishing lure waits in its box, ready for its next journey, ready to cast new lines into uncharted waters. For in the end, the greatest catch of all is the opportunity to pass on what we've learned, to share what we've cherished, and to trust that the lessons we hold dear will continue to ripple outward like circles on still water long after we ourselves have returned to shore. In the quiet moments of our lives, we all have our own fishing lures, objects, memories, traditions that connect us to those we love and the wisdom they shared. The question isn't whether we'll catch fish, but whether we'll be wise enough to recognize the real treasures when they come our way, and generous enough to pass them on to the next generation.